Hi, I'm Megan of Megan Collins Quilt Designs, and this is the Wish Quilt. The Wish Quilt is a traditionally pieced star quilt that was written for confident beginners. The blocks contain half square and quarter square triangle units, and we're going to talk about those in our tutorials today. It's the color placement and these extended star border that really gives the Wish Quilt its flair. These blocks are all the same in the main quilt, and the only thing that changes are the colors. But the color placement creates this chain effect across the quilt top, and it also determines which stars step forward and shine the brightest. I really hope you enjoyed making this one. This tutorial will walk you through making the quarter square triangles for the Wish Quilt. Each full star of the Wish Quilt has 4 of these quarter square triangle units. And this is what a quarter square triangle looks like. There are a couple of different ways to make these blocks. We are going to make a version that uses 2 colors of fabric and is often referred to as an hourglass block. And our blocks will finish at 6 inches by 6 inches, and there will be room to trim in these blocks. Trimming really makes your quilt blocks and your quilt top come together well. To make the quarter square triangles, we will start with 2 7.5-inch squares. One of these squares is our background fabric, and the other is a star fabric from our quilt block. I begin by marking my lines on the wrong side of one of these squares. I'm going to use this white water-soluble marking pencil to make my lines because the white's going to show up really well on this black fabric, but you can use whatever you want. These lines are on the back side of our fabric square, and these are our cut lines when we are finished making this block, so they won't affect your quilt top. So we're going to make a diagonal line across the fabric square, corner to corner. And this diagonal line is going to be our sewing guide. We are going to sew a 1/4 inch away from both sides of this diagonal line. So now we take this background square and we place it right sides together with our star fabric square. And I'm just going to put in a pin or 2 so it doesn't shift. And then I'm going to go and sew this. All right, here is my sewn fabric pair. You can see that I sewed a line a 1/4 inch away from both sides of my drawn diagonal line. And now we're going to cut this block apart on that drawn line. All right, so now we have 2 half square triangles. And I'm going to press these open to reduce bulk in the final quilt top, but I already have 2 that I pressed. I'll pull those out. All right, so now we're going to use our resulting 2 half square triangles to make the quarter square triangle. So we are going to mark a diagonal line on the wrong side of one of these half square triangles, just like we did with our original fabric square. All right, and then we're going to place it right sides together with our other half square triangle. And we want our diagonal seams to match, and we want the opposite fabrics to pair up. So we want our background fabric to pair up with our star fabric, and our star fabric on this side of the half square triangle to match up with our background fabric on that half square triangle. We'll place these right sides together. And because the seams are pressed open, it's going to take just a little bit more lining up. And then I pin in this seam to keep it from shifting. All right. And then we're going to use this diagonal line as a sewing guide again. And we are going to sew a 1/4 inch away from both sides of that diagonal line. Here's our sewn quarter square triangle. You can see that I sewed a 1/4 inch away from our drawn diagonal line on both sides. We are going to cut on that drawn line. And now we have 2 1/4 square triangles or hourglass blocks. I'm going to press these open and then we'll trim. There are a few ways to trim 1/4 square triangles, and you are welcome to use your preferred method. My favorite current method uses a square ruler. We are trimming these 1/4 square triangles to an unfinished size of 6.5 by 6.5 inches. So as long as your square ruler is larger than that, it will work for this method of trimming. So our first step is to line up one of the diagonal seams of our 1/4 square triangle with the 45-degree line on our ruler, and make sure that the 1/4 square triangle is covering at least a 6.5 by 6.5 area on our ruler. And I've marked my ruler with a little bit of tape so that I can quickly set this down and just see that there's a little bit of fabric coming over that 6.5 line on both of these sides, and then a little bit out here to trim as well. So we'll make sure we're lined up, and then we'll trim these 2 outside edges. Okay, and now that we have these 2 nicely trimmed edges, we will rotate our block, and we will use these to line up right on the 6.5 inch lines on our ruler. We are still lining up our diagonal seam with our 45-degree line, and then lining up these outside edges. All right, and then we'll trim the remaining 2 sides. So here's my unfinished 6.5 by 6.5 1/4 square triangle unit, and it's ready to be sewn into a Wish quilt block.